So my question to you is being anti-Zionist the same as being anti-Semitic? Let's say we have a guy named Bob. Bob doesn't know anything about geopolitics, and he hates Israel. And it might seem like Bob's hatred towards Israel is really just a facade for anti-Semitism. Because why else is it? I mean, so can anti-Zionism be a dog whistle for anti-Semitism?
Sure. Actually, Zionism can also be a dog whistle for anti-Semitism. There are plenty of anti-Semites that want the Jews out of their countries and say all Jews should go to Israel. White nationalists say that whites should be in charge of America and Jews should go to Israel. There was a incident, it's on YouTube and it was in the papers, where in Texas A&M University, it was Richard Spencer that was speaking. You've heard of him probably, alt-right guru. And there was after his speech about white nationalism, supremacy, whatever you want to call it, neo-Nazism, a rabbi, if I remember right, he was the Hillel rabbi. You see him in the video from the back. He stands up, he asks a question, and the question goes something like this. He's wearing a yarmulke, and he's holding a Jewish book in his hand. It's about this size, and he's like this, and he says, you just spoke about radical exclusion. The Torah teaches radical inclusion and love. Would you learn with me Torah so you could learn about love and inclusion? Something like that. So Richard Spencer says, really? You want radical inclusion? Do you think everybody in the Middle East should move to Israel? All the people in the world, include them. I said, no, you don't want that. I respect you, Jews.
No country wants everyone to.
Well, yeah, that's true.
It's
but it's not just you don't want everybody for overloading the economy. You only want Israel to be controlled by a certain type of people.
Well, lots of countries. Wait, hold on. Lots of countries are
let me finish the story.
Like,
Hold on.
For French people.
Yes,
Germany
and that's what he's saying. Yeah. That because I am a nationalist, an ethno-nationalist, I want Israel, and I am for Israel. He even once said in an Israeli interview, I'm a white Zionist. This guy doesn't like Jews. He says, I respect Jews. He doesn't want them just not in his country. I respect you guys. You have a sense of your identity because you had your own state, and you made sure that ensures your continuity. I'm paraphrasing. This is an exact quote, but this is what he said. And you don't want radical inclusion because you have your own state, your ethno-state, that gives you a sense of identity, sense of continuity. I want the same for my people, the white people over here. And the guy says, and then Spencer says, you're not answering. And he's standing there, humna. Says, yeah, I'm not answering. He says, I'm not answering. And that was the end of that. And it's an amazing thing how a white nationalist could beat a rabbi, or I don't know if he's really a rabbi, but I'm assuming he is, in an argument about morals. And the next day he explained, I think it was in the foreword of the Allgemeine or one of these papers, that he said, I wasn't on the debating team in school, okay? So there are anti-Semites that say, sure, get the Jews out of our countries. Herzl said the anti-Semites will be our best allies. They're anti-Semites who are Zionists. Look at the evangelicals. They want the Jews to end up in Israel so they could either convert or get killed depending upon what narrative you have. But there are people who don't like Jews, want them out of their countries, and dump them in the Middle East. There are anti-Semites that don't like Israel because they're Jews. But that's not anti-Zionism. They're not against Zionism. They're against Jews.
Right. You're saying right. You're saying that there is anti-Semitism in the world, period. That anti-Semitism represents itself and manifests itself in different ways, and it could manifest in.
Yes, but anti-Zionism as such, how in the world does that become anti-Semitism? I'll tell you how.
And I think it's a problem I think that if someone does really care about Israel, just like if you care about any place or person, you should be open to criticism of that place or person or country. Like it should not be beyond condemnation, right?
Of course not. Now, I'm going to tell you why the Zionists say anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Now, you're going to maybe give me a whole laundry list of reasons that Zionists have written about. But the way Zionists work is that if they want to instill an idea in the public, so first they instill normally first you have an idea, and then the idea becomes action. The idea becomes an application. The Zionists often do it the opposite way. When they have an idea that's not really palatable, first they disseminate the application. In this case, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Why? Well, obviously, why would anybody hate Israel? It must be he's an anti-Semite, or there's a double standard. There's no other country in the world that's asked to dismantle, only Israel, so it must be it's anti-Semitism. Or, look, anti-Zionism results in anti-Semitism, all these type of things. All of them are refutable, but there is a real reason why they themselves, meaning the Prime Minister of Israel, the other government officials of Israel, and the original architects of this idea that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, why they say it is. And I'll show it to you in a moment.
Why is it of such interest to you? Like, you mentioned that this is a real area of focus and expertise of yours. There's so much,
you said expertise, I said interest.
You have a wall of books here. I'm sure the Gemara and everything, and you've read it all. Why is critiquing Zionism so important to you?
So let me, after I tell you why they say anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism, I'll answer that. And the truth of the matter is, there's one or two principles about Zionism that if you understand those principles, you'll understand a lot about what the Zionists do. There is a problem where people look at Zionism and anti-Zionism in terms of the conflict with the Palestinians. That's not really the most helpful way to understand the issue of Zionism and anti-Zionism. Why? Because, for example, let's assume that Israel and the Palestinians work out a two-state solution. And let's assume that the Palestinians are happy. Let's assume that the Palestinians get 90% of the land and Israel is left with 10% of the land in the Negev desert. But Israel's happy.
I wouldn't be happy with that.
Okay. Theoretical.
Sure.
And let's say the Palestinians are happy and everybody's happy. Are the anti-Zionists now happy? Sure. I'm not happy because Zionism didn't change. There's an ideology called Zionism that existed independent and before there was any conflict with Palestinians. It wasn't even inevitable that there would be a conflict because remember, the Zionists had ideas about Uganda, Kenya today. They had other ideas. There were even Zionists that didn't think they need a state altogether, right? The cultural Zionists. There were all sorts of things. But Zionism is an ideology, which it does, the way Zionism was implemented, the Palestinians were in the way. But Zionism exists as an ideology, and that ideology is directly, well, put it this way. It's incompatible and with Judaism, and not only incompatible, it's really designed as a poison for Judaism, to destroy Judaism.
By the way, so we're in Far Rockaway right now. There's very religious Jewish communities around here in the 5 towns. Lots of Orthodox Jews, most of whom, if I had to guess, strongly support Israel. How does that work for you? You live here, you're part of these communities. Like, tell me, how does that work?
First of all, what do you mean support Israel? You think I don't support Israel? You think I want Israel to be bombed?
Let me ask you, do you support Israel?
What do you mean by support Israel? And see, this is part of the ambiguity. Here's what Zionists do. 90% of Jews. 90% of Jews are Zionists.
What do you mean by Zionist, by the way? What do you mean by Zionist? So, by some definitions of Zionist, you're a Zionist because you support Israel.
And that's what Zionists want when they say 90% of Jews are Zionists. When you say I support Israel,
the labels let people. But there's a lot of Reform or even secular Jews in this country who call themselves Zionists, and what they mean by Zionists, if you ask them, and I have, is they'll say, "Oh, I support Israel. I believe in Israel."
But that you didn't ask them what it means to support Israel. Do you mean support Israel's bombing Gaza,
They
or
mean-
support Israel receiving money for an
and
Iron
and
Dome?
they have a spectrum of answers. And some people, the more liberal, left-leaning people, will say, "I really care about Israel's survival, and I care about the Palestinians, and I want the war to end, and I want them to get the hostages back, and I hate Hamas." I mean, there's nuance to this, but there are lots of people that I know that call themselves Zionists, and what they mean by that is that they care about the prosperity of Israel, not at the expense of death and destruction for everyone else. But there's a spectrum to which, I think the term Zionism originally meant a home for the Jews.
No.
No?
No.
Do you think when Herzl was writing about Zionism, he was like, let me find a way to maximize death and destruction of all people? He's saying, no, let's find a home for the Jews.
You just made a binary, you just made a Boolean. It's either a home for the Jews or maximize destruction. The answer is C, none of the above. That's not what Zionism
to have
is.
a home for the Jews that required maybe some level of explosion, I don't know what
No,
was...
nothing to do with explosions. Nothing. First of all, there was a disagreement amongst the original Zionists whether the Arabs would, which is what they called the Palestinians and the Jews did, accept them with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
There are those who believe that.
I'm just saying there's Zionists and there's people who self-identify as Zionists, and what they mean by Zionism is that they support Israel.
Meaning, what do you mean support Israel?
And that has a spectrum of views. Some people, it's a very extreme view, and some people, they're just saying, look, I care about the prosperity of Israel and
the lives of the Jews in it.
And the lives of the Jews in it, and the lives of the people in the surrounding countries, and therefore
I guess what does his Zionism mean?
I think it's I think it means different things to different people, frankly.
Yeah, so therefore, when somebody tells you, and I don't know if they told this to you, but I've heard this 1,000 times, and so many people I know, that 90% of Jews are Zionists. That doesn't mean anything, because it means so many different things to different people. So let's take the extremes, okay?
Yeah.
Because usually right after they say 90% of Jews are Zionists, they say, well, 90% of Jews support Israel. Wait, hold on. Zionists and support Israel may be two different things, but that's what they say. And support Israel means what? Support Israel, you want Israel to bomb Gaza and Lebanon and Syria and wipe carpet bomb people? Or does it mean, I think Israel should get money for the Iron Dome so Jerusalem shouldn't be blown up by missiles?
What do you believe?
Hold on.
Where do you stand on this?
Yeah. So when you hear X percentage of Jews are Zionists, I agree with you, but based on what you said, it is a completely meaningless statement.
So I think some people might say that meaninglessly. Some people might say it in an anti-Semitic way, because they might, if someone says 90% of Jews are, Zionist in the utmost fashion, then I would
not utmost. They just say that statement, and two groups of people say that: anti-Semites and Zionists. They both say. The Zionists say it in order to delegitimize Judaism by pretending it's Zionism, and the Zionists say it in order to legitimize Zionism by pretending it's Judaism. But both the anti-Semites and the Zionists want everybody to believe that Zionism is Judaism. I once had a video after a protest we made, I think it was about 10 years ago, in Manhattan, Foley Square, against the Israeli government trying to draft the ultra-Orthodox Jews into the army. I made a video about it after. This video now has a couple million views. Then at the point that it had, I think, 1 million, David Duke, I think we can all agree he's an anti-Semite, wrote an article about me and the video. Basically, he said, don't believe Rabbi Shapiro that he's not really an anti-Zionist. He doesn't want the dismantling of Israel. He doesn't call for the dismantling of the settlements. He just wants his Jewish supremacist ultra-Orthodox Jews not to have to serve in the army. The anti-Semites, again, not 100% quote, but that's what he said. That was the gist. The anti-Semites want everybody to think Jews are Zionists. Zionists want people to think Jews are Zionists. They have a common cause over there, which should tell you something about whether it's beneficial or not for Jews to be Zionists. Okay, so right away you ask me why I would be against Zionism. So first thing, it's a hint. There's a little hint over here. If David Duke And the anti-Semites are all running around saying, yes, the Jews are Zionists, the Jews are Zionists. The odds are there's something there that should motivate the Jews not to be Zionists. But we'll get there. There's an ideology called Zionism. That's what I was speaking about before. There's an ideology called Zionism. In order to understand a lot of what Israel does, the way they act, what motivates them, you need to understand what Zionism is. When you say it means a lot of things to a lot of people, that's true. But there's something under the hood that, whether you realize that's Zionism or not, is driving Israel's actions. It's an ideology that it's a very, very profound and complex ideology. And you don't want to call it Zionism, don't, but that's what it is. Israel is different than all other countries in the world. Every country in the world is a country of its citizens. America is made for the American citizens. That's what I mean by that. Italy for the Italian citizens. You mentioned before that there are ethno-states. Ethno-states are made for a certain ethnicity of its citizens. Mm-hmm. Israel's different than all of that.
Why is Israel different from an ethno-state?
I'll tell you why. Much different than an ethno-state. Because Israel claims that it is not only the state, because it's the state of all the Jews all over the world. Zionism presupposes two things. One, the Jews are a nationality, not just a religion. And two, Israel is the country of that nationality. That means two things. Thing number one, if you live in Israel, even if you're an Israeli citizen and you're not Jewish, Israel's not your country, in the sense that, based on the 2018 nation-state law, only Jews have rights to self-determination in Israel.
How is it different from an ethno-state?
Let me finish, please. So that means two things. The second thing is going to be how it differs, but you need thing number one to understand thing number two, please. Thing number one, if you live in Israel and you're not Jewish, Israel's not your country, meaning you have no self-determination rights in Israel.
Unless you're an Arab citizen, which there's plenty.
No, even if you're an Arab citizen.
Really? Because there's people in the Knesset and the government who are Arab.
I didn't say you can't be the Knesset. I said you have no self-determination rights.
What does it mean, self-determination?
Self-determination rights means the rights to govern yourself, meaning only Jews have the right to govern themselves in Israel, meaning Israel has to be under the control of Jews.
Is that not the same as any ethno-state, or no?
Wait, there's a second thing. Remember, I said there's two things.
Yeah.
This is thing number one.
I'm impatient. Yeah, I'm going to be.
You can be, but I'm not. It's not going to. It's not going to help.
Do better.
What?
I'll be more patient.
You don't have to be more patient. Doesn't matter. You could be whatever you want, but I'm going to answer your question to the best of my ability, one way or the other. That means only Jews have a right to control Israel. Now, right now, so sure, you can be a member of the Supreme Court. You could do whatever you want. You have these civil rights. As long as you're a minority, then you could do whatever you want. But you cannot control the country. That right belongs to the Jews. And so long as the Jews are a majority, no big deal. It's a slam dunk. But should there be what Israel calls a demographic threat, should there be millions of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, such that if Israel annexes it, now the Jews will be in danger of being a minority, Israel cannot allow that. What will they do? Will they make laws that the minority of Jews have control over the majority of non-Jews? Will they make some shtick to ensure that only the Jews are a majority? So far, it hasn't happened. I mean, that's part of the reason why they didn't annex the West Bank and Gaza. They can't make the Palestinians citizens of Israel the way, let's say, America made the Texans that they conquered, the Mexicans that they conquered into Texans. But only Jews have a right, that's an ethno-state. Israel takes it one step further. Israel's not only not the state of the Jews, of the non-Jews who are in Israel. Israel is the state of the Jews who are not in Israel.
Like an ethno-state.
No. No other state. You've heard, no state claims to be the state of people who are not its citizens, never were its citizens, never lived there. You've heard, I'm sure, the talking point. It's false. That there's only one Jewish state, and I think 25, 30, 28, whatever is Arab states, Muslim states. It's not true. There's not a single Muslim state that claims to be the nation state of all Muslims in the world. Saudi Arabia doesn't claim it's the state of all Muslims.
Not all Muslims, but there are states that have a Muslim identity or
But
government.
that Israel was past that. Israel claims to be the state of all Jews all over the world, meaning Netanyahu, before he came to America to speak to Congress regarding Barack Obama's Iran deal, he said, I come to America to represent not only the people who voted for me, but all Jews all over the world. He's not the Pope of the Jews the way the Pope is the Pope of the Catholics.
I don't like that guy. I mean, he does things that are wrong.
But it's not just Netanyahu. All the way from the beginning of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, in his book, The Jewish State, said that the Zionists have a right, a legal right, to speak in the name of all Jews, and he went around saying he did. The legal right was an ancient Roman law called negotiorum gestio, which says that if you have a piece of chattel with nobody to take care of it, you, as a stranger, could manage it on behalf of the owner. The Jews have nobody to take care of them, so the Zionists become the legal gestors of the Jews, and they can speak in the name of the Jews. Our president, President Trump, well, the last time he was president, and then in a little while he will be again, he spoke to a group of Jews and he said, your prime minister, referring to Netanyahu, your country Israel. No head of state would refer to any group in a country, those citizens of his country, as a foreign head of state being your prime minister. Israel claims to be the state of all Jews. No other country does that.
That's problematic of Donald Trump. That's problematic of Netanyahu.
It's problematic of Zionism in general, because that's what Zionism says. The 2018 nation-state law says Israel is not just that Jews in Israel have more rights. Israel is the nation-state of all Jews. Israel claims that the Jews are a nationality, and Israel
Doesn't
is
the Torah claim that they're national?
No, it doesn't.
Am Yisrael?
Am means a society, not a nationality. You want to go off into that? What's the difference? Because it says women are a special am. Women are an am amongst themselves. That doesn't mean nationality. It means they're like a society. There's a female point of view, etc. When we speak about the Kohanim, in synagogue, we say Kohanim, am kadoshecha. The Kohanim are a special am. They're not another nationality. Am doesn't mean nationality. These translations that Zionists give you, that the word am or any word in the Bible refers to a modern nation state or modern nationality thing, that's a concept that did not even exist then, is not true. And none of these words refer to Jews. You want to know what the Jews are according to the Bible? Rabbi Saadia Gaon, 1,000 years ago, said, he was talking about, he has a sefer, a book, Emunas V'Deis. And in there, he's discussing, he lived in Egypt, and in there he's discussing Islam. And there were these inter-religious debates. And the Muslims believe in something called abrogation, which means that God took the law from the Jews and gave it to the Muslims, and now Muhammad is the last prophet. And Rabbi Saadia wants to say, no, that's not true, and I'll prove it to you from the Bible. And he says that he has verses in the Bible that says the Jewish people will exist forever. And he said, if the Jewish people exist forever, they will always have the Torah forever. Because Ein Umayseinu Uma El B'Seirasa, the Jewish people are only the Jewish people because they have the Torah. Without the Torah, they wouldn't be the Jews, without a Torahless Jews. There's no such thing as a Torahless Jews. The definition of the Jewish people are the people that have the Torah. If another nation would have had the Torah, they would be the Jews. And as I mentioned before, the definition of a Jew, according to the Torah, is somebody who's fulfilled 613, not fulfilled, somebody who's obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments. We are not a nationality, according to the Torah, in the slightest. We are a group of people who are deputized by God who have a calling, you can call it, to be a Mamleches Kehanim V'Goy Kodesh, the verse you described before, a priestly people. We have a job description, and we were given this job by God. We accepted it on Mount Sinai. We have a tradition that the souls of all future generations of Jews did accept it. Those souls will be recognizable because they will be born of Jewish mothers. We have a tradition, by the way, according to Jewish law, the same law that says being Jewish follows maternal lineage, says tribal and family affiliation follows paternal lineage. Therefore, being a Jew cannot be being a part of a tribe or a family, because maternal lineage is what determines it, as opposed to a tribal lineage or familial lineage. And look at the modern nations. What national characteristics did Jews ever have? Did we ever have a common language?
Yes.
Yeah, which language?
Hebrew?
Yeah, when did we speak Hebrew?
A while ago? I don't know.
Okay. So for thousands of years, Jews have not spoken Hebrew. Now, the Zionists have convinced themselves a funny story about Netanyahu and the Pope. This is also on YouTube. You Google Netanyahu Pope. Pope comes to Netanyahu and they're speaking to each other through an interpreter. And the Pope and Netanyahu says to the Pope that Jesus lived here in Israel and he spoke Hebrew here. So the Pope corrects him. He says, no, Aramaic. And the Pope is right. The Jews spoke Aramaic then. And the Jews did in biblical times speak Hebrew, but that's not what made them a people. The Jews were made into a people, as the Bible says.
You asked if they spoke all the same language.
No, there was a time they did, but most of the time they didn't. For thousands of years they didn't, and they were still Jews. They had no flag, they had no national anthem, they had no common land, language, or culture. And yet they're 100% Jews. There are no national characteristics to the Jews. Now, because the definition of a Jew is somebody that is obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments, as opposed to the rest of the world that's obligated to fulfill 7. That's it. Whenever you see the word Jew, you could put in brackets and replace that word with somebody who's obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments.
Were Jews always identified as Jews through matrilineal descent?
Yes.
What about in the times of Joseph and Moses? They married non-Israelite women, right?
They converted them.
They did?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sure. They just like Abraham did. Why would you think they didn't?
I thought they did.
I know, because the Zionists, Ben Gurion actually said.
Why do you think they did?
Because that's what the Jewish law says. And the Jewish law says that it was always matrilineal descent. We derive it from a verse in the Bible. And therefore, if anybody, also, it's prohibited to marry a non-Jewish woman. And Moses doesn't do prohibited things. And Moses' children were Jewish. And therefore, the only option available is that he converted them.
So if there's a really good, good righteous person, and there's evidence they attack someone, I could say no, they couldn't have attacked.
But there's no evidence that he didn't convert his wife.
But that's
there's no evidence.
Just trying to prove a.
No, I'm saying that there's no proof either way. So you said that
you're negating there's a lack of evidence that she was converted.
There's a lack of evidence anywhere. You don't need evidence she was converted, because if there was, how would you know about it? What evidence would you like?
Well, in the Torah, you'd think it would say.
No, it wouldn't. No. The Torah says very little about these people's families. Why would you think it would say in the Torah? It says in the Torah everything Moses did when he woke up in the morning every day. No. Why would you do that? Besides, it didn't need it to say in the Torah. I figured it out, right? So there's no evidence either way. So the idea that they married non-Jewish women without converting them, there's no evidence to that either. What we do know is that the Torah derives from, Jewish law derives from, now if you want, you could say Judaism is wrong. You could say the Jewish law that says that according to the Bible, it follows maternal lineage is wrong because, well, there's no evidence that Moses converted his wife, and no evidence, it should have certainly said it, and since it didn't say it, must be he married a non-Jewish woman, and therefore the fact that, who says Moses' children were Jewish anyway?
Not the Torah.
So maybe it followed maternal lineage, and because he married a non-Jewish wife, his children weren't Jewish.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
No, but there's no evidence for anything because it doesn't discuss it at all.
Right.
The only evidence we have is the evidence that we have in our tradition that we derive from a verse in the Bible, that maternal lineage is it. This is all neither here nor there.
Okay,
it's
fine.
no evidence either way, and that's that.
That's fair. So why and
Now-
when and how did being critical of Zionism and I asked this question before, tell me the origin of why this became important to you and how it became. Is that an offensive question? It's like I'm
No.
assuming it's important to you. No, I'm curious.
No, it
because
is. It's not offensive. I'm just trying, and
You're explaining this. You're answering the question of why Zionism is you disagree with it.
no.
My question is when. So I guess here's my question: were you ever more Zionist yourself, and did you veer from that path?
When I was a little kid.
When and how did you
It's not a
veer from
question
that
of the
path?
When I was a little kid, it's not a question of when. You know, when I was a little kid, so I remember 1968, Israel's 20th anniversary, right after the Six-Day War. I was a little kid. In our yeshiva, the principal made a whole speech about how when he was a kid, he was jealous of the Spanish kids because they had Spain, jealous of the French kids because they had France, and the Jewish kids didn't have anything. And now we have Israel. And we had these little pins that they put on our shirts that said Israel with the new Israeli map, the ones that with the land that they took after the 67 war. So, and they took us to a trip to the United Nations, and we ended up with Israeli flags. Does that mean I was Zionist? No, that means I was 8 years old, and I was treated as if, as an assumption I should be a Zionist. But as I grew up and learned stuff, it was pretty obvious that.
But the reason I ask is because,
I don't have a story where first I was a Zionist and then I had an epiphany or something like that. And
But there had to be a point, because this community that largely that you're part of is very. I think there's a lot of people that are very, very pro-Israel.
First of all, every Jew is allowed to think for himself.
Yeah.
And the fact that my neighbor maybe voted for one person candidate for president doesn't mean I do. And if my neighborhood voted for one candidate for president and I'm in the minority, you wouldn't ask me, well, how did you decide that this guy's a good candidate because other people don't? There has to be more of a reason why you would assume that the default of people are Zionists. And usually they are. It's just the majority, but they're a minority of people. It depends what you consider Zionist. Put it this way. The more educated you get about Zionism, the less possible it is to be a Zionist. Now I'm going to continue. And because I educated myself, it's pretty obvious not. So the Jews always considered themselves, this is basic Judaism 101. And the Bible says, according to our Talmud, this is the interpretation of the verse, when the Jews got the Torah, Moses said, Hayom hazen Yisrael, today you became a people, a society, whatever it is. The Jews never had it didn't make any sense what nationality. The Jews had no common land, language, or culture. Yes, during part of their history they did, but they were Jews even without that. And they had no indication. In the Bible, it's just the opposite. It's the Torah that makes them the Jews. And the Jews always self-identified like that. This Rav Sajigoin, this statement, Einu Moiseinu, was quoted all over the place in this 1,000 years. This was the bedrock of our identity, that the Torah is our identity, God is our identity. It's not like the Greeks that have Greek nationality and they have a god Zeus. Without Zeus, there would be no Greeks in our religion. Now, the Torah is what makes Jews into Jews. The Zionists have another idea. And the Jews were always very happy with this identity. The Jews, even though they were literate, compulsory education in the Jewish community started 2,000 years ago under the auspices of the high priest at the time, Yeshua ben Gamla. But we didn't have fiction literature. Jews were not doctors, lawyers. At certain times they were not allowed to be most of the time, but they were happy with that. The Jews asked at the beginning to be segregated in ghettos because culturally we have our own, like we say, we're priestly people and we need our own lifestyle, our own communities, loyal to our countries of residence, absolutely. But culturally, meaning religiously, the lifestyle-wise, we have our own lifestyle. Then came the Enlightenment and the Emancipation, and there were Jews that said, well, we have freedom not only of religion, we have freedom from religion, and we don't want to be religious. Maybe we don't even want to be Jews, and we'll assimilate. Russians, Russia's where the story I'm going to tell you took place. They wanted to assimilate Russian, German, France. And they figured one of the benefits of assimilation is no anti-Semitism, right? Especially now there's freedom of religion. They had a rude awakening. In 1881, there was a succession of terrible pogroms in Russia that attacked not only the religious Jews, but the non-religious Jews as well. Kill the Jews kind of thing. That was a big problem for them. Why are they attacking us? Are we like those guys? We don't want to be Jews. But the Gentiles will not allow us to be Gentiles. Why? Well, there was a good reason they didn't want to be Jews. And it was not because they wanted to take themselves away from religion. Vladimir Jabotinsky said, I quote, "I have no doubt that I'm a Zionist because the Jewish people is a very nasty people. Its neighbors hate it, and they're right." Yosef Chaim Brenner, another big Zionist thinker back in the day, if the tables were turned and others were like the Jews, he said, wouldn't we have good cause to hate them as well? Uri Tzvi Greenberg, another one of them, shares with us his opinion about why the religious Polish Jews, who he made fun of, were persecuted. Quote, "Those loathsome Jews are vomited out by any healthy collective and state, not because they're Jews, but because of their Jewish repulsiveness." There are a group of people who absorbed the anti-Semitic tropes against Jews. They were anti-Semites themselves. These people didn't like Jews. They thought they were disgusting, ugly, immoral even. And they said, we want to be out of this. We do not want nothing to do with these people. So they were the ones that escaped religion. And they were the ones that were attacked. And now they're in trouble, psychologically. Now they have this identity crisis because we don't want to be Jews. Ew, Jews. But they won't let us be non-Jews either. So what do? So their solution was that we have to change the whole idea of being a Jew, what it means to be a Jew. They figured that the anti-Semites still associate them with those Jews. What's the picture of a Jew? Also, some of them believe no matter what we do, the anti-Semites, they just won't let us be non-Jews. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to change the Jews. We're going to change them from a religion to a nationality.
Who made that decision?
The original Zionists. We're going to change them from a religion to a nationality.
The original Zionists, they were Jewish or they were not?
They were. Well, the original Jewish Zionists. We're going to be a nationality. And then we're going to change the aspirations of the Jews, the values of the Jews, the personalities of the Jews. Instead of wanting to sit a whole day with all these books that you see over here, studying and praying and stuff like that, we're going to win gold medals. We're going to have a strong army. We're going to be part of history again. We're smart people, we Jews, they said to themselves. We're going to win Nobel Prizes. Everybody's going to love the Jews. But we need, first of all, to change our personalities. To change our personalities, we need our own place. Yosef Chaim Brenner said, in order to get a state, we have to change our personalities. But in order to change our personalities, we need a state. It was a social engineering project that the Jews will no longer be like the ultra-Orthodox Jews. The Jews will be like, well, let Amnon Rubinstein explain this. We got to make the Jews healthy. That was the thing. They decided the Jews are unhealthy, neurotic, psychological problems, all sorts of things. They absorbed the stereotypes of the anti-Semites. Quote, Amnon Rubinstein was the